We are live for this week's Sales Confidence Masterclass. I am really excited that our wonderful high performance expert, Charlie Cowan, who is Strategic Account Executive at HighSpot and also a published author of How to Sell Tech and the Sales Journal, which I highly recommend if you enjoy today's masterclass, that you seek out Charlie's content and also his books. What's interesting about Charlie's career is that he's done most roles across the sales organization, from responsibility for channel and partnerships. He's had leadership roles and building teams. And for the last few years, he's decided to focus on delivering large enterprise accounts. And that's exactly where you should start thinking about developing mutual action plans with your prospects. He's going to talk about the frameworks, the tools, and how to use mutual action plans to close more deals. Super excited to have you on, Charlie. I will hand over the mic to you. It's all yours.
Thanks very much, James. And really looking forward to running through this session. Thank you very much for the introduction. So in today's masterclass, I'm going to be walking through how to build launch plans. You might call them mutual action plans, joint activity plans, close plans. And I'll give you some of my frameworks and strategies that have worked well for me. As James kindly said during the introduction there, why should you listen to me? I've been in the tech sales world for just over 22 years now, and I've covered most of the roles that are available. So I feel I've got a pretty broad spectrum. Last year, working with my own SDR, who was getting ready to move up to their own first AE role, we spent a bit of time talking through, what makes up a successful sales career, and how do you get started. And I put a lot of that into the recently published book, How to Sell Tech, which is really that foundational aspect. And at the center of that is this sales flywheel on the right here, which really embraces all of the external and internal tasks that it takes, in my view, to be a successful salesperson. It's not enough to just focus on the bits that you like, the closing or the presenting. You need to focus on the forecasting, the planning, the prospecting. And in this session, we're going to talk a little bit more about how you can be a bit more strategic around your closing. For me personally, as an active salesperson today, the way that I really like to learn is from other salespeople. I want to learn from people that are actually doing the same or a similar role as I am today, rather than someone that was doing it a decade or more ago. I want to learn quickly in little bite-sized chunks. So, I've got a problem, give me the answer so I can get on with my day. And I want to learn with practical examples, very much, showing and doing rather than just theory. And that's very much what I plan to walk you through today in this session. So my promise to you is that in 60 minutes time, you'll be ready to build your own launch plan for one of your key deals. So I like to start these sessions off by giving you 3 actionable takeaways. We're going to spend an hour together, but what are the 3 main things that I would leave you with? The first is, when you're making a plan, it has to be valuable to your customer. And this is one of the reasons why I'll mention why I refuse to talk about a close plan. It has to be something that is going to help your customer to get live in their project, and is something that they're going to share internally in their own business. The second actionable takeaway is to guide your customer through each of the steps in this process. You have probably sold 10, 50, 100 of these kinds of deals in your role. You know exactly what needs to happen, both in terms of your internal process, your quote approvals, sending things out, drafting an order form, and you've probably got a good idea of what your customer needs to do as well, because you've seen it all before. But for the customer, this might be the first time that they've bought software, certainly the first time they bought your software. And so you need to guide them through every step of that process and hold their hand. And the third actionable takeaway is about using visuals to create what if scenarios. What if the lawyer is away for a week? What if it takes 2 weeks longer for them to feed back on your proposal? What if your pricing has to change and that changes the timeline? Using these visuals are going to help your customer to understand when they're going to get live and what the implications are to when they want to get value from the service or product that you're selling. And I'll walk you through all of these three in this session. So to kick off, let's think about closing a deal. When I first started in sales, I read, some great books, spin selling, customer-centric selling, and a lot of these books and the training courses really talked about closing techniques. Like there were some specific questions you could ask to someone, and automatically you'd close that deal and move on to contracts. Is this a solution that you can see yourself using? Yes, it is. Boom, closed. Would you like to add on the premium features? Yes, I would. Ah, awesome. Closed. Would you like to start on the Tuesday or the Wednesday? Closed. But life just is not like that. You can't ask one cryptic question and close a deal. And the reason is that it's not just one person's decision. If you've ever read the Challenger Customer or the Challenger Sale, you'll know that in the first iteration of that book, there were 5.4 customer representatives in the buying group. And I think in their more recent publication, they talk about 6.8 people being in that buying group. It's not one person's decision as to whether to choose you or not. So there's lots of different people involved, but also the vast majority of those micro decisions that lead towards choosing your solution, you're not even involved with as a seller. They're those internal conversations that happen between influencers and those that are interested in the solution. So I like to think more of closing a deal as a bit like bringing a plane into land on the runway. It's the customer that chooses where the runway is, and that might be their Q1 or their Q2, depending on when they want to get value from the solution. And all we can do as sellers is work out where we want to land on that runway. Do we want to land up at the front end and have a nice, gentle deceleration towards the end of the runway? Or do we want to land careering towards the end of the runway at the end of our quarter or the end of our financial year? And sadly, what happens for many sellers is that we career straight past the end of the runway, past the end of Q4, past the end of the financial year, and end up floating in some water at the other end. And the reason why this happens so often is because closing a deal involves a lot of moving parts. It's a lot like juggling large numbers of battens. We're keeping in our mind all of the product activity that needs to happen, the commercial activity, the legal activity, exec peering. All of this is being kept up in the air. And for most sellers, this is happening in their heads, and it's just too risky, and it ends up with deals going straight past the end of the financial period. So I mentioned earlier that I've got an issue with close plans, or the word close plans, and here are a few of them. The first is that many sellers just don't know how to create one. Just the practical elements, the logistics of creating a physical close plan. And therefore, they don't do it, or they put a small table in a PowerPoint deck, or they create a small spreadsheet. They just haven't been coached through how to do that. Hopefully I'll cover some of that for you today. The second is that Often close plans are static. They are created because a sales manager has asked the seller to create one so that they have got confidence that that deal is coming in this quarter. So you'll often hear the sales manager, oh, this is your strategic deal. This is your must-win deal for the quarter. Can you build me a close plan? But it's built once for that meeting with the sales manager. And because the seller doesn't believe that it's helping them to close the deal, they never update it or move it forwards. The third challenge is that they end with the close. It's a close plan. It gets to the signature and that's it. And therefore, it doesn't go on to talk about resourcing of teams and implementation and project launch workshops. It never gets to the actual value that the customer is focused on. They aren't built with the customers. So it's your rose-tinted view of all of the activity that is going to happen in the coming weeks and months, but it doesn't get that sense check from the customer themselves. And ultimately, this all comes together to mean that they don't add value to the customer. They don't lead towards the customer unboxing. You know, if you think about buying a new car, what are you interested in? I'm interested in shutting the door, getting in the car and driving out of that showroom. That is my value. If I'm getting the new iPhone 14, I'm interested in getting that home and opening up the box. That's what I'm interested in, not when I paid for it, not when I signed the contract for it. And that's the problem with closed plans, is they never get to the unboxing for the customer. So closed plan as a phrase, I'm not too comfortable with. One step further on, and not much better, is mutual activity plan or joint activity plan. And this is often the phrase that's used. Why am I not so comfortable with this? Because it's a wolf in sheep's clothing in many examples. It is just a closed plan, but we can't call it a closed plan. So let's call it a mutual activity plan. And we'll put the word mutual in as some sort of passive aggressive way of letting the customer know that we want them to do something. It still is not about giving the customer value. This is something that we've got to do so that I can get my deal closed. I tend to talk a lot more about a launch plan or a project launch plan. And depending on whether you sell a product, a SaaS product, a service, consulting, you might come up with something that's a bit different. But it's the plan to get you to when you're getting value from this purchase. So launching, licenses going live, whatever that might be. So let's talk about launch plans and how we go about, creating one and some different variations. There are 3 different types that I'm going to walk you through, and they come with kind of increasing levels of complexity and but also with increasing levels of value to your customer. The first I'm going to show you is building it in a spreadsheet. And this is probably familiar to what you might be creating already. I'll do it in Google Sheets. You might do it in Excel. The next is a thing called a Kanban board, which I'll explain is quite well used in a development environment. And I'm going to show you that using a tool called Trello. And then the third, which is the one that I use and I definitely recommend, is a tool called Smart Sheets. And this is where we'll look at a Gantt chart, which is how project management teams typically function. But before we get to the fun of the tools, we need to do an important step. And this step can be carried out well before you get anywhere near a deal that is coming towards negotiation and closing, and you're actually having to build a close plan. This is something that you can do in advance and have prepped ready for your deals as they come along. And that is to map out all of your different work streams. So what do I mean by that? If you think about the types of deals you're doing, whether you're selling a product or selling consulting services, you'll have lots of different things that you need to do, some big buckets. So one might be about confirming that your product or service is a good fit for your customer. So that'll be things like, discovery call. It might be a demonstration. It might be running a proof of value or proof of concept. It might be about configuring an environment for them. It might be a customer reference call. Anything to do with making sure that your product can solve their problem. The next big bucket is the commercial work stream. How much is this thing going to cost? We've got to draft an order form. We've got to send pricing. We've got to get an internal quote approved. Then contractual. If they're not an existing customer of yours, there may be MSAs, there may be NDAs, there may be order forms, SOWs, there may be data processing agreements, all of these different types of paperwork that need to be processed from a legal perspective. If they're not an existing customer of yours, then there could be supplier onboarding, going through Ariba or Coupa and uploading your sustainability assessments and your financials, all of this kind of legwork that needs to set you up as a supplier that they can place a PO on. Depending on the size of your deal, there may be some executive peering. You need to connect your CFO with their CFO or a board member to one of their board members. An implementation work stream, and this is kind of split into two depending on what type of product or service you're providing. There may be planning and implementation. So this could be a scope of work, a level of effort, a statement of work, introducing some of the implementation team and sharing bios of that team. Then there's the actual implementation work stream, a project launch workshop, assigning resources, all of the things that are going to happen after you've closed your deal to get this project live for them. And then a very important one, the holiday work stream. Who is going to be off when, so that we don't have any surprises that as we go through our launch plan, we're not going to find out suddenly that the lawyer's off for 2 weeks in Australia and we weren't aware. So these are just some of the big buckets, and depending on your product or service, you may have some other buckets that are important to the way that customers get value from your product or service. Then, for each one of those big buckets, what I'm going to ask you to do is to break it down to the atomic level of detail of everything that is going to happen. So as an example, in the commercial work stream, I have to draft a quote. I can't give a customer pricing without drafting a quote. Whether I'm doing that in Salesforce or in a spreadsheet, in a Word document, whatever that might be, I've got to draft up a quote at some point for my customer. Depending on my internal company process, I might have to submit that quote for some internal approvals. I will then get that internal approval, hopefully. I'll then be able to draft the external proposal for that quote that I would then share to my customer. I'll then send that external quote to the customer. The customer will then review that quote, and then they'll come back to me with feedback about that quote, and so on and so on. Now you can say, this is a lot of detail. This is going down to this atomic level of detail. But these things have to happen. It's impossible to go from drafting the quote to the customer providing feedback to the quote without you going through most of these steps, depending on what your internal process is. And so it's really useful for you to spend time to get down to the actual detail of this, because this goes back to my point about helping your customer understand all of the things that need to happen. So you need to document it. Having documented that, you'll probably do that on a spreadsheet, maybe in a table in a document. You can now go to building your launch plan. And the first example I'll give you is just of doing it in a spreadsheet. And you've probably seen things like this. Maybe you do this already today. I'll actually go live into that spreadsheet example. So here is a spreadsheet. Here you can see I've broken down the individual work streams. So product work stream, commercial work stream, contractual work stream, and I've gone down to the atomic level of detail just to try and give you an idea of all of the different things that might have to happen for each of these processes. And of course, they'll be different for each customer, each opportunity I'm working on. But at a high level, all of these things need to happen. Then, depending on how diligent I am, I might have put in a start and an end date of when I think these things are going to happen. I might have put an owner in here. It's going to be me. It's going to be someone at the customer. It might be someone else in our team. And then I might have, some red, amber, green on whether these things have been started, whether or not, or they've been completed. And this probably makes up 90% of all of the close plans I've ever seen that either reps that have worked for me have shared with me, or that I've seen online. It's a lot of, these are all the tasks, and this is what needs to happen. Now, the problem with this is sort of threefold. One is, it is a list. It's not a plan. Yes, these are all the things that need to happen. It is useful if you want to convince your manager that you've got a handle on all the things that need to happen, and you can probably have a nice one-to-one with your manager, explaining to her or to him that you know what the next steps are. But it doesn't tell you what needs to happen next. So we're recording this on the 28th of September. If I was to look at this and go, right, what needs to happen next? It would be difficult. I'd have to start going through here. It's difficult to work out what needs to happen next. It's also very difficult. If we take this example here, it's the 28th of September when the customer's going to start providing feedback to the demonstration that we've done. And they're going to provide that feedback by the 4th of October. What if they don't do that until the 10th of October? What does that do to our plan? Well, it's pretty much impossible for me to do any updating here other than going through all of these and rebuilding this entire plan in my mind. So this is why these spreadsheet-based plans become very static. You use it once to give you a point of view at a particular date and time, but they don't really help you to guide the customer towards a launch. So that's the spreadsheet example. It's a list, not a plan. It's difficult to see what's coming next. And it's difficult to play out what-if scenarios. What if the lawyer's away for 2 weeks? What if they take a week longer to provide us with their feedback? So option 2, which take things forward another step, and I quite like, because it's quite visual, I'm quite a visual person, is the idea of a Kanban board. Now, if you're not familiar with a Kanban board, it's used quite a lot in agile development, and I think a lot of it came from Toyota and how they built a lot of their lean manufacturing processes a good few years ago. And the idea is that you create sort of buckets of activity, and you can only have a certain number of things in each bucket at each time. So in this example here, it's the in progress things that are ones that you want to be focusing on. What are the 3 things that we actually need to be working on right now? And that can focus the mind rather than looking at the big list of things that are in the backlog that are about to come along in future. So I use a tool called Trello. It's free to use. You can get premium versions, and your company may use it, especially if you've got developers. They're probably using it quite a lot. And so let me just show you a little bit of what that looks like. So it's really easy to create these boards, and in a board you can create lists. It's really easy, and then you add these cards to an individual list. And a card is just simple. You can just have it as a title like here, or you can write more detailed descriptions about what is going to be going on in that specific activity if you want. One of the things that I really like about this is kind of the visual nature of the colors. So it's possible here to say, right, anything that's in green is a customer responsibility. Anything that's in yellow is my responsibility. And therefore, when you're sharing this with your customer, it's really easy for them to see, right, what have they got to do and what have I got to do? And for example, once I've drafted the quotation, I can just drag that across to done, and I can say, right now, I need to send the quote for internal approval. It's a really nice kind of interactive way of working. And when I'm on customer calls, you can actually have this on the screen and you can drag things around, and it makes the customer feel, right, we've succeeded in moving some of these things across, and now we're bringing some new things in, and all they need to focus on is what is in progress. So that can be quite useful, and it's quite a nice step up from the spreadsheet. The challenge, though, you're still left with a couple of the problems of the spreadsheet. And that is, it's difficult to visualize what will happen when. So if I'm looking at the Trello and I'm trying to explain to my customer when they're going to get live, I've still got a list of activities. It's not actually telling me where I'm going to land my plane on the runway. And it's also difficult to play that what if scenarios. It's not helping me to understand if the lawyer's away for 2 weeks, what impact that is going to make on the plan. So nice and dynamic, interactive with your customer, but it still doesn't get me to understanding when we're going to land the plane on the runway. And so that brings me to what I actually use, which is a Gantt chart. Now, if you're not familiar with a Gantt chart, it is a project management tool, and they often look a lot like this. They show a timeline across the top. They show all those set of activities down the side, and then they're showing an actual graphical representation of those timelines, those activities, when they're going to happen. The key thing that a Gantt chart introduces is a thing called a dependency. And that is that a certain activity is linked to other activities. You cannot, for example, start one activity until you've completed the other. To give you an example, I can't send a quote to a customer unless I've received the internal approval from my deal desk, as an example. If deal desk take longer to provide me with that approval, then it's going to push out when I can send that quote to the customer. And that is critical in terms of understanding when you're going to land the plane on the runway. When is the customer going to be able to unbox the beautiful product or solution that you're giving to them? And that's important because, as you will know as a seller, life happens. Sorry, Charlie, our board meeting's been pushed back a week. Well, that changes things. Our lawyer is away this week. That changes things. Our consulting partners told us they can't resource the project. They can't start for another 2 weeks. That changes things. These what ifs are so important in terms of taking a static plan and a list of activities into something that's dynamic and is actually helping to guide your customer forwards. So let me jump into the Smartsheet example and I'll show you. So Smartsheet, again, is a nice little SaaS tool, really easy. Your company might have access to it or give you a license, or you can just get a personal license. It's like $7 or $8 or pounds a month. I think it's not a huge investment and is well worth it if you're just going to bring one more deal in on time. And at first look, it's pretty similar to a spreadsheet. Here I've got all my different work streams. That's good. I've broken it all down by the atomic level of what needs to happen. The main difference here is that we've got 2 new columns, the duration and a predecessor. So if I go down here to this SOW work stream, I've left a few that I've not filled out here. So the SOW work stream, so this is pre-sales. We've got to draft the project plan with our consulting team. I've got to share that draft plan with the customer. They're going to give me some feedback. I'm then going to update that project plan and share that. And then what I want to do is introduce some of those key resources to the customer. But I can't do that until I've updated the project plan with and shared that with the customer. So this row 47 is a predecessor to me doing this. So I just say, right, row 47 in there. and then it's going to take me 5 days to introduce those resources to the customer. Then the customer is going to sign off the implementation plan because they've been wowed by our amazing resources. So that is a predecessor, which is 48. And it is going to take them 10 days to sign off the implementation plan. And then I'm going to be able to share an SOW with the customer, and it's going to take me 5 days to draft that and get through approval, as an example. And the beauty of this is that when you turn that into the Gantt view, you can see all of these activities that need to happen one after another. And this is the date when I'm going to be able to share the SOW with the customer. It's really helping me and the customer to visualize how we're coming into land that plane on the runway. So if I just scroll up here, this looks a lot more complicated than it is. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to just show you the spreadsheet idea to start with. You've already created this kind of spreadsheet in a spreadsheet. The only thing you've got to introduce is the idea of a predecessor and how long each of these things are going to take place. A couple of things that I like to do. I'll change the color. If something has already been completed, it's green. If we're behind on it, then I might make that red, so that we know there's something that's an alert there. Another thing that I'll often do is change things that the customer is going to be responsible to a certain color, just so that that focuses their attention. This week you're supposed to be providing feedback to the demonstration. So, how are we getting on with that? So all well and good. This is a nice, easy thing to share with your customer. But for me, this is where it becomes really useful as a seller and guiding, because I might come here and say, right here, sorry, I went down too quickly there. Here's the contractual work stream. And down here, important row 33, 32, the customer signs the terms and conditions, the order form and the SOW, and then we're going to have counter signature. That is closing day. Yes, the plan then goes on to the implementation and the project launch workshop. But what your manager is interested in, what your VP of sales is interested in, is when is the customer going to sign this? And on the face of it, you might go, this is great. We're coming up to the end of the financial year. This is going to come in and land on the 20th of December, a few days before Christmas, and I can go off for my Christmas and New Year and, feel very relaxed about this. Everyone's happy before the end of the calendar year. But one of the things that I love about the visual nature of this is that it really starts to help you question your own assumptions. So here's an example. We're going to go through in the product work stream. We're going to do a demonstration for the customer. We're going to get feedback from that customer on that demonstration. We're then going to do a proof of value or a proof of concept. We're going to schedule that. And then we're going to run that proof of value across maybe 3 or 4 weeks, and then they're going to sign that off. But hang on, here I've got that I'm going to prepare a proposal for the customer at the start of October. But how can I prepare a proposal when we haven't even done the proof of value yet? So here, instead of 7 being the predecessor, I'm going to change this to 9, which is the row when the proof of value has been signed off. And immediately, this moves all of this out, and it changes everything that comes after it. Now, the customer is signing their contract in the middle of January, outside of our calendar year, and potentially outside of our financial year, depending on when you're coming to the end of your financial year. So this is all about helping you to understand where the runway is, where the end of the runway is, and whether you're going to career off the end of it. Now, this is important to your customer as well. It's not just about you closing the deal. Your customer is interested in unboxing their beautiful new iPhone. They want to know, when are we going to get the licenses? When are we going to start this project? When are we going to bring our consulting firm in and start giving value to our teams? And here, where they thought they were going to start a project on the 1st of January, now they're actually only starting a project on the 1st of or 2nd of February. So this can be really used, instead of focusing in on when you're going to get a signature, to actually have your customer going, well, we need to be starting in the 1st of January. So then you say, right, well, let's come back and look at what's going on here. Do we need to spend 4 weeks doing the proof of value? Can we get through that in a week and a half? Can you spend less time on your legal review, or could we do that in parallel? And it really helps to put you on the same side of the table as your champion, as maybe a lot of your buying group, and actually to bring this plan in so that they can get to their runway, their 1st of January start date. I called out holidays earlier. Never forget this. It's always something that can catch people out, and it's a really good question when you're speaking with customers, just to make sure, has our sponsor, has our legal representative got any holidays coming up? And then scroll up. Is this person required for any of this activity at that particular time? So that's a smart sheet Gantt chart. As I say, it looks more complicated than it is. Once you've built one, you'll be building them left, right, and center. I use it for every strategic deal that I am working on. You're not going to use it for every simple renewal. You're not going to use it for every simple add-on. But for the deals that are going to make or break your quarter or your year, why wouldn't you be doing something of this level of detail? So you've created this masterpiece, and now about communicating it with your customer. There's that phrase, if a tree falls in the woods, did it really fall over? And if a launch plan is created without being shared with the customer, is it really a launch plan? In my view, no, it isn't. It's your rose-tinted view of what is going to happen. And these things only become truly powerful once you get the customer interacting and giving you their thoughts. Actually, that's not when we need it to start. And actually, no, we have more things in our internal process. We're not going to be able to review red lines in that period of time. So the way that I use this is that at the start of every call with the customer, and this really starts from the moment you've got through demonstrations and you're getting into a vendor selection, is to say simply, based on our conversations, this is my understanding of where we are and what we still have to do to get your team live. Focus on the unboxing, not to get a contract signed, to get your team live. What have I got wrong, or what would you like to change? Be very open. I probably got this wrong. I don't understand your business. What have I got wrong? What would you like to change? And you'll start to get a lot of input and feedback from the customer on that. When you do that, your customer will think, wow, there is a lot to do. We need to move faster. Like I said at the very start of this session, for many of your customers, your buyers, this is the first time they bought software like this. And it's certainly the first time they bought your software. So they don't know the atomic level of detail that they're going to have to go through. And what you've done is just peel the curtain back and open their eyes to what needs to happen. So it'll add urgency, but their own urgency, rather than you having to dangle a discount in front of them. They'll think, wow, this seller is actually focused on my project, not just on the signature, because they've built a plan that takes me all the way through to my unboxing, to the value that I'm going to get. They really are thinking about how do they solve our strategic problem and not how do they get a sale. And thirdly, they'll be thinking, this seller is more like a consultant than a salesperson. If this is what the sales team is like, then imagine the amount of rigor and care and attention that they're going to bring towards our actual project. I've never seen anyone review one of these close plans. I slipped into it there, a launch plan, and reject it. They really see it as a valuable tool for their business and their project. A couple of things to remember. whilst this is about value to your customer, they're not actually going to use the plan. They're not going to interact with it and update things. And I've seen, there's a number of tools on the market where you can give your customer access to it. Even through Trello or Smartsheets, you could share it with them, or you could give them access to a Google Sheet. Your customer is not going to go in there and mark up their actions. It's still a plan that you've created. They're unlikely to be going in there and doing work. So it has to be more about you communicating it to them. Send them an updated version after every call so that they don't have to do those updates themselves. As I talked through on the call, ask them, what have I got wrong? What would you like to change? Make those changes and then send it through to them, and make it easy for your customer. If you're sharing it through a platform, even if that is Smartsheet or Trello, you're asking them to, can you set up a free account, and what do I need, to do that? And I need to log in. You're just putting barriers to entry. So either just send it to them on email after the call, which can be quite an easy thing. Download the launch plan from Smartsheets or Trello or Excel and send it to them. Or if you use a sales enablement platform like here at HighSpot, what I do is actually just share it with people through a portal. And so here, here's my current understanding of the activities. Let me know if I've misunderstood anything. And there, they can view it either within the system or they can download it and share internally. No logins required, no complexity for them. And I get the added bonus of being able to see analytics on how long they're spending time looking at it, if they are, or if they've not at all. So that's make it easy for them. And then share internally as widely as possible. When we talked about at the start, why do most managers ask for a close plan? It's because they want to have confidence that their seller understands what is going to happen. So the next time your manager says, what's happening with the Acme deal, and you hit them with this, they're going to be, all right, this person knows exactly what's going on. And you can have a real live and valuable coaching session around what do you think about this, and what would you advise here, and do you think we could do these things in parallel that are actually going to help you to get your deal closed. This gives your sales manager a fantastic asset that they can go and show off to their own sales VP as well. And so that brings us towards the end of this session, which I really hope has been valuable to you. At the start of it, I gave you my promise that hopefully in 60 minutes time, you'd be ready to build your own launch plan for one of your key deals. And I hope you feel set to be able to go and spin up a free trial of something like Smartsheets or Trello, to be able to document out all of those different work streams and the atomic parts of your own sales process, and to be able to build in those dependencies and predecessors so that you can share this kind of launch plan with your customers. If you like to read through this kind of topic, I've got a whole chapter in How to Sell Tech, which walks through that process of building out the work streams and the component parts, which you can get in How to Sell Tech, which is either paperback, hardback, Kindle, or an audiobook where you can listen to me and my lovely voice walk you through in soothing tones how to build launch plans in there. But with that, thank you very much for your time. I hope it's been valuable, and happy selling. And James, I'll hand over back to yourself.
Charlie, that was super valuable. Thank you. We've got a few members on. If there's any questions, let us know now while we've still got Charlie. Otherwise, we'll be talking in more detail about this session in our peer group call tomorrow. Although Tamir has just come up with a question. Excuse me, I don't know if you can see this, Charlie, in the chat. On average, how many times from start to finish does the close date move around? Just trying to understand at which point in the deal the forecasting is extremely reliable with a plan like this, i.e., 1 month to close, 3 weeks to close, or is it almost always pretty accurate from day one?
It moves around quite a lot in my experience. In the first iteration that you share with the customer, for me, it's just like throwing something out there and knowing that it's going to be wrong. Really, at that point, you're just saying, this is my understanding from other customers that I work with of the things that need to happen. And you're asking them to react to that. And so in that first iteration, it'll probably move quite a lot. There may be something massive where they just go, no, we're looking at starting this in our Q3, not Q1. And that's important because they've just told you where their runway is, and it may be very different to where yours was. But as you move through the sales process, those changes in date tend to get less and less and less. And you and your customer together are really locking in on their ideal start date, which is, like I said, the unboxing. What then tends to happen is that instead of the lawyer's away for a week, therefore everything moves out by 1 week, it tends to be the lawyer's away for a week. How can we reshuffle the plan so that we don't change the value live date? And it becomes a lot more about you working together with the customer. So my sense is that I get a lot of confidence the closer and closer I get to the end, and it tends to move less and less.
Great, awesome. Any other questions? Pop them in. I was just wondering, is there like, from your career experience, obviously people are closing different size of deals. At what point does this start to become valuable? What size of deals do you think closed plans mutual action plans start to come into their own?
Yeah, I think it doesn't matter whether you're selling SMB, whether you're selling enterprise or strategic, direct or channel. 80% of your business tends to come from 20% of your accounts or your or your territory, and you'll know which are the deals that are going to make your number and push you into accelerators. And it's those must-win deals where you want to start to add in that additional effort. It doesn't matter if those are SMB deals. If they're the deals that are going to help you push past your 100% and get you into accelerators, then those are the ones that you need to be focusing on. What I hope you saw in the Smartsheet example, and I said it a couple of times, this looks more complicated than it is. And often when I've walked through this with either a customer or another member of the team, they go, "Wow, you must have spent hours on this," and I'm like, it's not that complicated, because once you've built it once, the process does not change significantly from customer to customer. Those atomic levels of detail, you create it once, and yes, they will change a little bit customer by customer, and the dates will change, but what needs to happen doesn't change that much. So taking the pre-work and then putting the dates in for an individual customer doesn't take that much effort. So even if you're working on some smaller size deals, think about those 4 or 5 deals that are ones that are meaningful, and then clone this Smartsheet idea, and you'll have one up and running in, I'd say, less than 20 minutes. It's not that difficult.
Great response. Andrea has got a question around, which I think is fair. Have you ever had someone push back and be like, "Yeah, don't like the look of this, Charlie"? And how do you respond to that, or is that an indication of how they feel about the process working with you?
I think your point at the end there is absolutely valid. It's a great qualifier. If someone won't spend 10 minutes with you at the start of a call walking through something like this, that gives you some insight into whether you're in column A or column D, E, and F. They won't spend the time working with you. I've not had anyone push back in terms of I'm refusing to talk to you or to look at that, because they can learn something from you, even if it's not to do with your own company and they're thinking about going with someone else. What I talked about earlier on are they going to engage in it and actually look at it when you're not there and start updating and sending you an email and say, oh, this date's wrong? They're not. They're focused on their own internal process. So that's something that I'd say not necessarily push back, but there'll be ambivalence maybe towards it. But that doesn't mean it's not valuable.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Fantastic session. As you heard, I would recommend it. This is how I learned about Charlie in terms of his book, whatever stage of career that you're at. It's very well structured, very digestible, and well organized. And it also could be something that you recommend for your own teams that you're part of. So thanks very much, Charlie. Really appreciate you running this week's masterclass, and look forward to hanging out and speaking soon.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.